You guys are the first people coming over this year, so I haven't done it for this year. But here's my, whoops. I feel like when people come over, I would be sort of already creepily like sitting here, and they would like let themselves in, and there would be a chair sort of set up for them where you are pretty much. And I feel like in my friend group, I am the most like neurotic and into being certain about things. So I would like do a little check. Here's where my nose, if I'm leaning forward and breathing and talking, this is where my nose is likely to come out to. So we'll circle this here. You're not talking to your friend like this the whole time. I feel like you're kind of like this.
Sure.
And I feel like me, I like to sit on the edge. So you're kind of, so I, yeah, like if you're trying to be precise, like this is where the breathing occurs. Because I don't want people to just take my word for it, I would like mark out the feet. So like, you know, here's 1 foot. Here is my 3 foot mark. And like sometimes I would write the number. So this is like 3. 4 feet. Got a cheerful chalk color. This makes it less sad and weird. 5 feet. And here is the recommended distance here. You know for a fact that you are at least 6 feet.
A French study finds that people under lockdown experience time lived in the present as slowing down, but speeding up when considered over a defined segment of time. A moment plods, dilates, the day, the week, the month blurs, or simply evaporates. Time is the new weather, the new small talk, how the days pass without the usual markers or occasions for novelty. We talk of time mainly as a problem to solve, to fill up, or somehow hold on to. Even your average non-physicist neighbor can have some pretty sophisticated ideas about time. Says one, it's like trying to play the piano, but there are no black keys to find your way around. Remember murder hornets? Was that really a whole year ago? Now, was that before or after the murder of George Floyd? When human brains are deprived of variety, stimulation, and new environments, the effects are most felt in the hippocampal region, the part of the brain responsible for the formation of new memories. Such changes to the hippocampus are normally associated with aging, as a person's world becomes more confined. The longer the pandemic goes on, find researchers, the harder it is becoming for people to form new memories. Would the most memorable period in most of our lives somehow elude our remembering?
It's been over a year. Well, I don't even know what life was like before now.
That May isn't even so long ago, and already it can seem like deep time. You look it up in an old calendar, and all you wrote down were 3 dots inside of brackets, either showing a gap in the story.
Are we filming? Yeah. Oh shit.
Or just boredom. You could almost be forgiven for thinking it, that maybe this May will be the last of the bad months before things start to get better.
This is Artemis. She is 10 today. I'm gonna make her a cake. It's gonna be a raw meat cake. Yeah. Are you hungry? You hungry? She'll eat anything. She will eat anything. There. Yeah. Well, I don't even know what life was like before now, other than feeling anxious and uncertain. Yeah. No planning. I can't plan for anything right now. It feels awful, yeah. Like I can't do the things that, like all the resources that make you or give you an identity, like me going to the climbing gym, me being able to like see my friends, like these markers of that build your identity are gone. So I don't know, and part of feel like I lost a part of who I am during this time. I mean, you just get into this like this habit. You just hop on social media and then you're just scrolling through like so much stuff that's like unfettered information, like what is real, what isn't, how people are feeling, things that people are doing to distract themselves, like TikTok videos. I somehow got into this thing watching this woman grooming dogs, and I just couldn't stop watching her clean dogs. And things I don't really give a shit about. I'm just like in it. I'm like in this like digital like world, and I'm like lost in it sometimes. I get these prompts on my phone telling me like, you've been on your phone for 10 hours today. And I'm like, fuck. Oh well. I kind of knew he was sick in the summer because he's losing like exorbitant amount of weight, and that's usually like a signal of something happening. And it was like a week before Christmas that he had like kidney failure, and obviously if something like that happens, you think the worst. Yeah, from when we found out in January that he had cancer to the day that he died was 4 weeks. I did not have a good relationship with my dad. And that's a part of the grieving process I'm going through, is not being able to reconcile some of those really hard feelings I had with him.
It's crazy to not see people for months on end, and like, you know, like do you ever get that feeling where you want to just like stop time and you want like a year to just like read and learn and try to figure out what is an actually like true or appropriate thing to think? But you don't have that kind of time, and there are a lot of different voices yelling different things, and everything feels very urgent. And like, I think for a lot of people, the urgency of this year and the sort of sense that the authorities, of course, you know, on a really literal level, they don't know what to do. Like, they are guessing. There is guidance from science bodies. There is sort of like competing concerns that, you know, obviously seem to me like should clearly be less important, but I guess I am not in government. And I mean, they make rules, those rules change, they try to do X, they tell you to do Y, it turns out that's not true. I think that level of uncertainty is like very uncomfortable for people. And I mean, it's certainly uncomfortable for me too. Like I also crave certainty, and I want to know that I am doing the right thing. You know, when I speak with my vaccine hesitant friend, I feel like we have both agreed that it is productive for us to talk about it. And like, we do make an effort to just talk normally, and like, it's not about trying to change anybody's mind or get mad or, you know, throw around big words like duty or obligation, actually. You know, you just love each other, and you feel like you want to understand how people are thinking, and like, the idea that I could independently reach a conclusion about whether X or Y vaccine is good or bad seems laughable to me. Like, you can read a lot about it, you can try to understand, but I mean, I think ultimately I just don't have the background to assess these things. And so I am essentially just like running on trust. And that is like that's a frightening thing to stake your life on.
But this was Masks Anonymous. I deserve my chip. God is my witness. I have not worn a mask. Don't even think about going to Canadian Tire Costco. They will dogpile you. If you're not going to pick up a gun, if you're not going to shed blood for freedom, the least you can do is have the strength to show your face. Amen? I'm bugging out up north. I started canning. I started making jam. I started pickling eggs. A lost art. How come grandmothers don't hand that down to their kids anymore? My dining room table's full of mason jars. I'm pickling eggs right now. I'm getting ready for the worst case scenario. Please do the same, but I hope I don't need it. But if I do, whatever. Amen. Love you.
Something a friend said early on, how it was like a science fiction movie happening to somebody else. Until sure enough, it was happening here too. The way our leaders often spoke only reinforced the sense we were living through some local B-movie production.
My friends, we're losing the battle between the variants and vaccines.
The messages on the street could be just as confusing. Other signs are unmistakable, like these encampments occupying the city's parks, ravines, and other hidden away corners. Visit one, and most of their residents will tell you that these places feel safer than the city's overcrowded shelter system. While there, you'll likely find one of these tiny shelters, created by a local carpenter, the city's first manifestation of pandemic architecture.
Where did you leave the first one? Oh, this is where you left it?
Yeah,
I was under the impression you built it here, but you
I did build it
built
here.
it here and you left it here.
I built it here and I left it here. Just looking on a map and trying to find somewhere where I wouldn't be bothered by too many people, running a generator and having a light here working in the evening. I would come back sometimes to see it, and I guess I remember opening the door and seeing, yeah, someone put all of their things inside, and then they also wrote a name inside as well, and yeah, it was definitely being used. I really didn't think I would be able to build more than like 4 or 5, and I thought that that would be great if I got enough money to do that. And then someone from CBC came and they saw the shelter and they contacted me and they said, hey, we're gonna do a story about this. And I was like, cool. And then as soon as that story went out, the GoFundMe page exploded, and then it became it was within reach to build like many of them.
Were you surprised when the city filed its injunction?
Yeah, partially. I mean, like from my previous interactions with the city, like I sort of was expecting that to happen at some point. And just dealing with the city has kind of blown my mind how much I dislike the way bureaucracy operates overall, and this general unwillingness to acknowledge certain realities. I guess the tiny shelter idea was first created in BC when I was in this intentional community, and before I left I thought it would be nice to build to build a little structure for myself to stay in that was small enough to keep me warm, or to use my body heat to keep the structure warm in colder temperatures. And yeah.
What did you take away from that experience?
So many things. And mainly from the community, just this energy of like, you know, if you, that you're able to just change your life. You're able to just create the things that you want in your life, and that it's sort of like up to you to do it. And this energy in the community was like, hey, like let's, you know, I want to, you know, learn how to do therapy with horses. And they would just make a fenced in area and like somehow get horses and figure out how to take care of them and then walk them and learn to ride them. And then get other people to like be around these animals and like other things like, oh, we should get chickens this year. And like they would just get chickens and build a coop. And like, it's not like they just knew how to do all of these things beforehand. They had to figure it out. And yeah, when things break in this community, they would like open it up and see what went wrong and then fix it and then order the right parts to do that. And like, it was like this constant learning and a new appreciation for being almost like taking your place in nature and being a part of that whole process.
And I got a call like 7 in the evening on a Sunday. And my mom and my dad, they FaceTime me, and my dad's like, I'm dying right now. I can't do this anymore. I think I've had it better than most. We were able to have a funeral. It was only 40 people, which is very small in our family, because Chinese funerals are pretty ritualistic. There's a lot of things that we do, a lot of, not quite praying, but there's a lot of ways to honor the dead. I think his siblings didn't really grieve, so that was really hard. Not being able to hug my family, that was really hard. I mean, we kind of broke some of those rules because it was really fucking hard.
It's bad. How bad has it been? I struggle to quantify it or to sort of describe it. Like the third wave is, I'd say, just dramatic in younger patients with the disease, and just sort of like all kinds of stories of people who, did everything right, did every little care and precaution all the way through the pandemic, and then become severely ill after months of lockdown, and that, and young people too, people who are my age who have severe illness and need to be in hospital.
Do you remember when you first heard about coronavirus and what was emerging in Wuhan?
Yes. So, I mean, I think I heard about it probably in January, and I remember actually, my brother, he's not a physician, he's a history professor, and he texted me like, oh, this is going on in China, is this anything to worry about? And I said, well, no, probably there's nothing, just, there are always new diseases, outbreaks all the time, that's nothing. But, it's in China, who knows? We don't actually know what's going on. Of course, you look at those texts like 3 weeks later, it's like, what kind of expert am I to say that? I would never have imagined the look of the first wave of the lockdown. Like, that was just like so unprecedented and so like that I would never have imagined. Like the pictures of the world with no people in all the streets and the extent of, I would never have, I mean, I think that's not like, there's no textbook. This is what, when there's a global pandemic, will be the response. I think it was kind of a lot made on the fly, and you, in retrospect, say like, okay, yeah, I guess this makes sense. Yeah, I struggle with that. Am I optimistic about the future? I hate to be pessimistic, but in a lot of ways, I don't think COVID is the worst thing going. Like, I think climate change is probably more substantial and puts our society more at risk. I wonder sometimes if the solutions to medical problems are more amenable to our technologic society and to building on a foundation of lab-based research that is well established, whereas making societal changes or climate, even COVID, even the response to COVID, we maybe struggled more with the public health response in terms of what are the mask guidelines, how do we restructure our society so we're less at risk of it, how do we implement lockdowns reasonably, stop lockdowns reasonably. That part was harder than coming up with a vaccine, and a vaccine is you're cured and you can find a way out of it. But I'm not an expert on climate change, but I don't know if the same type of technological solution is there, or if the foundation of research that is needed to implement such a change like that. COVID is not the first time we've had a bad infection. We have all kinds of vaccines. We've done this before in some ways. Like mRNA vaccines, yes, it was the first time that we had these, but the research that went on for years and years and years so that it was latent and could be implemented to use it at this time. But I don't know if for other problems we have, if the same is true.
In a lot of ways, I'm like apolitical. I don't know. I don't like considering myself as someone that's very political. I really like Carl Sagan in that way, where he sort of says, like the problems in our world don't require like 4-year solutions. They require like long-term committed solutions. So it's almost like having people in office that change so often, it's really detrimental to dealing with reality. I don't know. Yeah, but that's not his exact words at all. What does he say? He says CO2 emissions, they don't understand borders. They don't care about borders. They go wherever they want. They have no concept of human politics. Yeah.
What's the dumbest or most embarrassing thing you bought online?
I don't consider this embarrassing. I feel like this is awesome, but because we host a lot of like Zoom dance parties, and so we have fully kind of made a like trashy dive bar in our living room. Like we have a full-size disco ball in there. We've got like one wall is all like gold sequin curtains. We have all these other lights that like revolve and stuff. So I feel like those purchases I stand behind. But yeah, my husband also bought this just for green screening. Like he bought like a green, a bunch of green cloth, but also this like green bodysuit that is like you can zip it up like right over your face. Suit. What's that?
Like a Zentai suit.
Oh, I don't know what that is.
Oh, okay. I think that's what you're describing.
Okay.
It's like a solid bodysuit.
Yes, that's like green. Yes. I feel like these things may come in handy later on.
Have you ever smelled the city in spring? Dion Brand writes, dead winter, circling still, it smells of eagerness and embarrassment, and most of all, longing. People look as if they're unraveling. And that, she wrote, in the before times. By now, we are many seasons deep into the unraveling, and it's easy to forget what we once longed for, except maybe other people. On our walk one morning, we find a band of pigeons involved in some sort of occult ritual down at the beach. According to some theories nowadays, these birds might not even be real.
first 6 months of quarantine made me bottom out really hard on sort of just lethargy, lack of any kind of muscle movement. There have been ways in which I've discovered embodiment, in ways I didn't expect, being locked down. That includes like taking Buto classes online, which I would never think to do if it was in person. Buto is, I guess, an avant-garde Japanese dance form that came out of both World War II and Japan's experience of World War II, and also an interest in purging some Western influence from Japanese dance and reacting to more classical forms of Japanese dance, like No. And often the movements are extremely slow, like incredibly glacial and deliberate. And a lot of the training is around expressing and sensing one's own body and giving the audience that sense of your own expression. Some of its major themes are suffering and death, but also rebirth and regeneration. It's not necessarily a sad form, but it is very emotive, I would say. There's a saying that's like, the body is a vessel for an infinite substitution. So it's this constant emptying and filling of the body with images and sensation.
Would you mind demonstrating what Buto looks like for us?
Sure. Oh gosh.
It was hard shutting down the gym. You know, I had a great team of gals, my competitors, who helped me do it, but it was hard. I think the hardest thing about it was taking all the photos of my boxers off the walls, because they had been there for so long, and they were fight photos, you know, women jumping up in the air, winning fights. That's the time where I think I shed the tears. Yeah. After about 2 weeks, you know, I had a good cry here and there, and after about 2 weeks, my shoulders dropped, and it was kind of like, oh my God, I don't think I've been this stress-free in 24 years, because, you know, boxing gyms are not money makers, you know. They're basically paid on passion. I can show someone how powerful they are at their first class. You teach them how to hit properly, you give them access to a heavy bag, and once they start hitting, they're kind of like, I had no idea I was this strong. I would never let someone get in the ring that wasn't ready for it. Sometimes people would approach me and say, I want to fight, and inside my mind I would be like, are you kidding? Like, this is the last person I think would ever want to fight. And they would want to fight, they would fight. It's a pretty life-changing experience to step in that ring.
Do you remember your first fight?
I do remember my first fight.
Where was it?
It was at some Howard Johnson out by the airport. It was supposedly Toronto's second ever women's fight, sanctioned women's fight. And I got in the ring with this very tough woman, Silverstone, Carol Silverstone. And first round, and I was terrified. I'm in the corner thinking, why would I do this to myself? And the bell goes, we go at each other, and it was just like a cat fight. You know, for every 2 punches I throw, I get hit, she throws, she gets hit. And I went back to my corner, and my coach said, Savoy, do what we worked on. And I'm like, what did we work on? And he said, let her throw a punch, move your head and punch. And I'm kind of like, what? He's like, we worked on this all week. And I'm like, okay. So I go out there, and again, I'm kind of like, why would anybody do this to themselves? So I'm going out, and I'm like, okay, let her throw a punch, let her throw a punch. She throws a punch, I move my head, I punch, and her head snaps back, and I'm like, oh, okay. And I do it again, and it works. And all of a sudden, it's so awesome when something you worked on clicks in the ring, right? It didn't click in the training, but it clicked in the ring. And I just did that for 2 more rounds, and won, and it was awesome.
In the first 6 months of the pandemic, it felt like a natural culling of relationships, both from my end and from their end. of relationships that never worked to begin with, but for some superficial reason or another, we're just continuing, limping along. So it's interesting to see what relationships I couldn't tolerate anymore because they didn't have enough meaning. You know, my threshold for what was valuable, I think, changed. I guess the joy and the difficulty of the pandemic is that you could just let them lapse. You know, everything was being let lapse in the past year. So one didn't have to stage the confrontations to end friendships or end relationships in that way.
Have your politics shifted at all?
I had to repress a lot of feelings about party politics during the pandemic. They were just too brutal to think about. The insufficiency of macro politics at this time. And, you know, I watched my sister go through a lot of anxiety of just like constantly being plugged into the news around, you know, how situations are being handled at the large scale. And I sort of retreated in a way to the communal level of things, the level of small groups, interpersonal dynamics that could be sort of figured out in a room together, instead of the, you know, politics of statistics.
If we really wanted to be in this together, as our politicians tell us, we would have handled the pandemic, the vaccine rollout, the job securities, the increased wages, the hero pay that lasted for a very short time. We would have flipped the script on how we've always treated these communities, right? We are the last on the political agenda. We're the last to be considered during a crisis, and that hasn't changed. COVID only magnified and intensified that reality. Yeah, so we're in Jane and Finch. I grew up in just down the street in Tomori, and it's a community, I think, that really puts a highlight into what Toronto really is, right? As opposed to what it tells itself it is about the world-class city. There's, like I said, a cultural mishmash of folks from all over the place. There's also very glaring structural inequalities and kind of a history of neglect from all levels of government for literally probably the last 40, 50 years. So then you get a community that has lots of folks who are working class, who are really, really near or under the poverty line, and you see a huge amount of really need that erupts. And in the context of the pandemic, we know that a lot of our frontline workers, healthcare workers, live in this community, right? So those of us hit the hardest by a pandemic, whether it was SARS or COVID-19, come from communities like this, and are the ones who are asked to take the most risk, do the most dangerous work, and are often not paid living wages. That's what Jane and Finch is. Also, on top of all that, we do dance, we have celebrations, we live life, and it is a beautiful place of amidst the struggle. We do kind of fun, wonderful things here.
To understand that the issue is not for people. The issue is capitalism. And understanding that policing has never kept us safe. These cameras will not keep us safe. These cameras will not feed us.
Police presence here has always been intense. From when I was young, growing up, being stopped constantly on the bus, being, you know, roughed up or wrongly, or we're looking for somebody that looks like you, everybody looks like you, to the way in which they've tracked and survey and keep us in databases. All of that has not changed, right? And we constantly see that what we also fight in the community too is that it's so very difficult for us to tell our own story about our community because policing is the official story.
Can you have fun in a pandemic?
Absolutely. I find awkwardness really thrilling. Like, it makes me think that we've never known how to socialize, in fact. That we've lived under the illusion of fluidity in the social sphere. And returning to, like, a very elemental awkwardness between people is kind of exciting. To see how we fail to communicate and how we stutter with each other. I perversely enjoy that kind of stuff.
being away from home, having family back in Brazil. All my family, everyone is back in Brazil. It's been hard, you know. At the beginning of it, my mom's partner passed away of COVID. I think towards the end of April 2020. So that was difficult because my mom also, you know, she lived with him. She's a nurse. She tested positive, so that was like the first traumatic experience of the pandemic, besides the lockdown. Yeah, she was asymptomatic. I think the hardest thing was because she lost her partner. So like she's still very much depressed. And because she works in the hospital, she's seen it, you know, what's been happening in Brazil with COVID. So she's not doing so well. You know, she like recovered from COVID, but all the consequences of it, she still has some lingering like symptoms. That she gets tired and she doesn't have any energy, and I think it's related to COVID. So. And besides that, like my mom, my whole family got COVID. So my siblings, my 3 sisters, my brother, they all got COVID as well. My relationship, at least with my dad, was already like non-existent because of the election in 2018, because he voted for Bolsonaro. So I tried kind of like reach out to find out how he was doing, to make sure that everyone was doing okay. But I think that's the hardest thing for me to talk about. It's what's happening in Brazil, because it gets me very angry, you know? There's no way that people didn't see that coming. With COVID, it was so clear, it is so clear to everyone that Bolsonaro has chosen to let people die.
Hey, how you doing? They're called FEMA concentration camp. Detention center, okay, that once in, you're always in. And who are they going to put in there? Well, they're going to be putting in there people that are going against their society, that speak up.
Right here, I have 2 sets of signatures of the same person, Doug Ford. You can't tell the signatures. The signatures on the regulations need to be investigated by the police for authenticity.
My little sister is vaccine injured. She was injured in 1974. So I kept up on that debate for many, many, many years. And those of us who have saw this coming. Vaccines has been sold to the public for decades as the mythological science that saved humanity, when really it was just about clean water and plumbing. Every religion, all indigenous cultures, even the stars talk about this time as being a huge transformation for humanity. Unfortunately, many are going to perish. But those of us who see the light and are not afraid to stand up will see a day when this is over. I see a day when the UN will come down. And the corrupt who, I see that day within, you know, it may take a few years, but it's going to happen.
Right now at work, it's certainly I'm like the most disenchanted with my job I've ever been. It's really depressing. Our patient population in the ICU at Toronto General is either like all of our patients are either COVID patients still right now, or they're called COVID recovered, which just means they tested positive for COVID more than 21 days ago. So now they're cleared from COVID.
but they're not recovered. Certainly, these are people who are still on like multiple life support modalities. All of our patients are on ECMO, we have maybe on the unit right now 3 patients who are not on this like external heart-lung machine. So most of our patients are in their 40s with young families. Like, it's just really disheartening. It's very depressing for sure. We're watching a lot of people sort of in the prime of their lives die slow, protracted deaths. I've been an ICU nurse for 11 and a half years and a nurse for almost 18 years.
And why did you get into nursing initially?
To be honest, I left high school in grade 9 and had a child very early. And then when I was about 19, with like no real prospects or plans, I decided I needed to get a good job. I wanted a union job. I wanted something respectable, something reliable. And nursing at the time was a 3-year program, so it seemed achievable for someone who hadn't finished high school. Yeah, absolutely. I enjoy my job. Like, I didn't really go into nursing with some like romanticized idea about like saving people's lives. I just thought it was like really good, honest work, but it's definitely rewarding. Particularly, I found when I moved into the ICU that it was like kind of really an honor to like be there with people when they're in crisis, when families are in crisis, and to sort of be able to guide people like through that experience. You know, I think that nurses feel that a lot of the appreciation that they get is just a lot of lip service. It's not really like backed up with policy change. Like, nurses are actually pretty easy to please. Like, we like to work hard. Like, we like our job. We want to be here, like, doing this, like, kind of shitty, depressing, like, gross work for people. We actually feel, like, pretty honored by it. But, you know, like, to just have, like, more and more work put upon you, more and more risk put upon you, more and more stress put upon you, and to get, like, really nothing in return other than, like, people just like occasionally clapping their hands for you. You know, a cost of living wage increase would be nice. I've been nursing for 18 years and never had one. It's really all we talk about in the break room these days is like, where are you gonna go? What are your other options? Certainly leaving the ICU. Even just taking, people are like, I can afford to just take 6 months off. Like, I'm just gonna take a leave of absence. If they won't give me a leave of absence, it's fine. Like, I'll quit and I'll find another job later. It's for sure at least 40 to 50% of the people I work with are looking at other avenues.
What about you?
If I'm not going to be treated well here, I might as well go somewhere where I'm paid more. I'm licensed in the States, so when the border opens, I can get paid a lot more money to do the same work there. You know?
Like, honestly, if we were in a horror movie, the final girl wouldn't be the pretty virgin, it'd be the sex worker, because we are used to survival. That is what we are good at. I'm a sex worker. I have been a sex worker since 2004. Resiliency is what I do. I am a human cockroach. I will always find a way to survive. It's a very common thing among sex workers. We're used to it.
What have you been doing to make ends meet?
Luckily, I've already got a bit of an internet following due to a number of other things that I've done. But when I finally gathered myself, I started an OnlyFans, and that was far more profitable for me because I was able to leverage the amount of followers that I did have and turn them over into subscriptions.
Do you think you've been successful at it?
I'm in the top 1%, so I think so.
Like top 1% of creators?
Yes.
Oh.
Yeah. When you're a dancer, you're not just a dancer, you're also someone's girlfriend for the length of a couple of songs. You're a therapist, you're someone's hype man, and you've got to do all of this topless while grinding on someone's lap and performing, you know, pole tricks. So I think in the club it's a lot more physical, whereas when it's online, the energy shifts to a lot more psychological, and you have to make people feel comforted. You have to make them feel like you care about them. And that is easier for me to do in a face-to-face environment. I've had people blatantly pretend to be other people when they've bought one-on-one shows for me. They'll tell me their camera's not working and they'll send me selfies of themselves that I know were taken from a different adult creator.
Do you have a family?
I do. I have a son.
And how old is he?
My son is 9 years old. He's lonely and he doesn't understand. He's had 2 birthdays in quarantine. He already struggled to make friends before school started, and now he's having a much tougher time.
My family lives in many countries, all over. Trinidad is our ancestral roots. My dad still lives there, and so to literally not be able to go to Trinidad is one of the few places that closed its borders even to citizens. So even if I wanted to go, I couldn't go. That was a psychological sense of wow, that was felt cut off and adrift, and in a lot of ways. Trinidad is even though I don't ever see myself living there again, it's a psychological safety net, It's a buffer to the things that I experienced living in North America, because there's always this sense, well, I'm from somewhere else. I can go somewhere else if I need to, and feel a sense of safety and a sense of belonging. That is just not part of my daily life here, For many of us, depending on what we look like, public space has always been fraught with tensions, and I think that's one thing the pandemic did. It made it fraught for everybody. So even if you didn't know what that was like, you now knew what that was like, And so to be walking down the street and see your favorite store has closed, to go to a park that previously felt comfortable and suddenly feel tense because there's too many people too close to you, to understand that even if you were not experiencing the loss of somebody close to you, that people living all around you were experiencing that. And I always think of Toronto in particular because so many of us come from somewhere else. We live in a city where more than half the population lives with the permanent grief and loss of displacement and homesickness and being part of a diaspora. And so, I always have this visual in my head of those heat maps that show a red glow, in a certain area, and that if you mapped homesickness, globally, that Toronto would just be this red glow because so many of us are walking around in that that's a daily thing, When there's a crisis happening anywhere in the world, we live in a city where your neighbors are feeling it, right? We live in that place. We look at the terrible, terrible wave of COVID in India, and we know how many people from India live in this city and are desperately trying to help family members back home. The volcano in the Caribbean goes off, and we know, right? So I feel that very viscerally living in this city.
A friend from another city writes, "Another day, another rabbit hole to kill the time." Did you know that when amnesiacs lose access to their past, they also lose most of their ability to imagine the future? And the rest of us, who can still picture a future, that happens in the part of the brain where we tend to think in the third person. Meaning, we think of our future selves as almost a stranger, a person we might not even want to be friends with. We tell her a story we heard about two friends who each appeared in the other's dream on the same pandemic night, despite not having seen each other in 5 years, and now living in cities far apart. "The dreaming is weird all over," she writes back. "My dreams are now more real to me than whatever I did last week."
Doing that at work. I've never been bored with Derek a day in my life. Derek was probably born, like, even though he's older than me, he was born bored of me. But I find Derek to be a constant, like, an absolutely constant, uninterrupted, enduring, just source of entertainment and delight.
That's true. Kyle's in love with me. And it can be uncomfortable.
Yeah, it's hard for Derek.
At first lockdown, there's a bit of novelty, you know? It was a bit exciting. Do we even have, like, should I buy water? Should I stock up on soup? Will there be cash in the future? And then that novelty wore off. And then for me, the reality is that my dad, who had dementia, was living in a retirement residence when the pandemic hit, and he went into lockdown and it killed him, basically. So by the time we got, we didn't see him for months. By the time we got in, he had lost his language. He was incontinent. He was living with shit and vermin around him. We could not get him out of there. We sued. There was an investigation. The residence was negligent. He became so sick he went to a hospital, and he spent his last couple months in a hospital, where I was only allowed to see him the night before he died, and then the night he died. Yeah, so death. It's been about death. It's been about my dad's death. It's been about my best friend's mom dying, my dad's best friend dying. Some of it COVID. My dad's best friend got COVID from his grandson, who brought it home when schools reopened. That's a whole other kind of guilt and grief involved in that. I don't want to make it sound like death doesn't occur outside of COVID, but it's really been high, it's been, it's like someone took a yellow highlighter to it and made it part of every week and every day.
My mom died in January, and she died, it was not, wasn't related to COVID. She had cancer. It all happened really, really fast. I wasn't able to have a funeral for my mom, or I can't believe how kind of like cruel and mean it feels to not, to not be able to count on just those regular life things. Like, I love going to bars. I couldn't do, I couldn't just do that. Like, my mom died, and I couldn't even just go to a bar and just sit there or meet friends.
That's how I felt. Yeah, I just wanted to eat a meal and have people come by. We didn't have to talk about my dad. We didn't have to talk about anything serious at all. You find that now, for a long time in the pandemic, your meetups with people were so pre-planned and so had such an agenda, which is talk about the pandemic, or talk about the dad dying, or talk about, do you have enough of this? Have you got a shot? There's no shooting the shit. My nephew is 8 years old, and when we're alone together, we have this thing I taught him where he says, let's shoot the shit. And we just talk about nothing at all. We talk about balloons. We talk about, do snakes know they're eating little birds? And,
do they?
So it's just it's free time.
I was definitely, processing what was going on. I think we were all having a lot of like weird pandemic dreams, being trapped in tiny spaces, or, like Armageddon type dreams. I had a lot of time because I wasn't working in the first wave of the pandemic. And so I was in my studio a lot. I'm still kind of working out the themes. So there is this thing about hands that I didn't really realize that was a theme in what I was creating. So I don't know, maybe it's just like this sense of like, having purpose and having a sense of, I don't know, control, or maybe it's neither of those things. I don't really know.
Has your work gotten weirder?
I think it's gotten a lot weirder. I think because I've had more time to dedicate to it, I have started taking it more seriously. So yeah, I think that I've just been more experimental, and I've started making animations with these ceramic figures. And like that's really sort of drawing on something that I've been working on for years, which is self-portraiture. And so like animating parts of myself, bringing like externalizing and animating parts that have been buried. Many of like the figures are based on objects in my home that I've been looking at and staring at and contemplating. And, they represent people that I can't see, or parties that I've had and haven't been able to have.
If you didn't have that during this time, what do you think you would have filled it with?
Oh God, I wouldn't like to say. I mean, I have no idea. I guess probably more drinking. More, if that's possible. Probably more fighting with my partner. We get along pretty well, but no, it really was a lifesaver.
What makes it different is like, it's not just boom, 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 boom. Like Muay Thai, you go boom, boom. Like you hit. You go through, you don't just hit, But also, Muay Thai was known as a blood sport, and it was actually illegal in Canada for a while. So I feel like it's just that thing where it's like, oh, you do Muay Thai, like you fight, Like it's not just you feel me? But every martial art is, of course, an art, and you're an artist when you do it. But to me, just knowing that I use all of my limbs, like it's hands, elbows, knees, like it's the art of 8 limbs, right? It's not just punching, not just kicking. I work out so much and I push myself to points where I feel like I can't move anymore, because I feel like at that point, your blood is flowing, your thoughts are flowing at the same time. When, around beginning of November, end of October, I think, it was real hard for me. I was kind of in a crazy spot. I can't lie, I was drinking a lot, stuff like that. And I feel like what happened was I was kind of just realizing who I was more, and not that I didn't know, but more as you have to let other people know type thing now. And so that was actually the time where I came out as trans and stuff like that. And I was working out a lot, so I felt connected with myself, but it was I was disconnected with everybody else, because I knew who I was, but I wasn't letting anybody else know. I was real low at that point, but as soon as I was able to be you know what? This is my life, and I don't care if my mom is gonna miss her little girl or something like that, I miss myself. So I just honestly just said fuck it, and I came out and I told everybody, and I was like, this is my name, you like it or not. My mom said it reminded her of a dog named Benji, but she's liking it now, she likes him now, and everyone's good with it. And honestly, I wish it happened earlier, but time, everyone has their own timeline, right? So to her, that's definitely a big change and a shock for sure. Your kid coming to you after all those years saying, hey, I don't feel like the gender I was born, you know, like stuff like that. So, but then when I brought it back up to her, she was like, you know what? You're my kid. I would love you if you killed somebody. And that was kind of it, you know? And, you know, like it stressed her out for a bit for sure because she didn't know the process, you know? She didn't know what would happen, and she got worried because she heard testosterone can make people really angry and like stuff like that, you know? So, but like I'm on testosterone now and I'm actually nicer than I was, you know? So.
I like online learning. It's a lot better than my previous learning in person. Well, mostly because there's a lot less conflict and drama in school. I mean, in remote learning than in-person learning, and it's a lot more isolated. So I get time to focus on me and my work, rather than other people and their problems along with my work. What about your grades? My grades have improved as well because I'm more focused on my work, and I persevere a lot, and I focus more, and I'm more independent. I miss the thrill of having people clap for me and my accomplishments and my friends' accomplishments, and seeing my mom and dad in the stands cheering me on. And I also miss the nervousness that comes with it, when you know you have to play at your best and give your all.
Being restricted from the things that we would normally do, that has been very frustrating. And Desiree has been online for the past year and a half. I know she says that it's okay and she's doing well, her grades has improved, but also it's been very challenging because I could see the frustration sometimes wanting to go out there, telling me that she missed her friend, wanting to meet with her friend. So sometimes I'm sad and Desiree might be sad, and then I'll be like, play something. And then the whole environment changed, and then we start baking and playing music on the viola. So it's a blessing, I can say.
A lot has happened in the last year or more. Do you two ever talk about politics?
We talk about everything. Like, I create that space so that we can share. I always give Desiree a space where she can have an own opinion and express herself. So yes, we do talk about politics. So she has her own ideas about American politics, about Canadian politics.
We've talked a lot about Black Lives Matter and the different perspectives of Black Lives Matter and other forms of racism as well. I think that's the most passionate about when I'm talking with my mom. So sometimes just let me go off, and I appreciate that. I remember I used to think that all white people were bad, just like stay away from white people, and just all of them are mean people. But my mom recently taught me that white people are, not all white people, some people are ignorant or rude or just don't understand different things, but there are white people who want to change and accept all different races and all different classes, and you shouldn't judge a race by their history. I worry about staying in this sort of like state forever, just masks and computer screens and remote learning, that like the pandemic might clear up, but we'll never go back to how it was before, like playing in the gardens without restrictions or social distancing. I think I worry the most that I might not be able to make friends again, because I've just been by myself this whole time and just isolated, that I might be a little awkward around friends that I've known forever.
Do you follow politics much?
I feel like that's a really deep question for me. And I don't want to go too far into it because I don't know how much you want to add into that documentary part of there. And like, I'm kind of conspiracy up in here. But yeah, I don't really like the government at all, to be honest. So I've long distrusted the government, you know, because like of little things that have happened when I was a kid. And, you know, like I am, you know, half black. So I've definitely seen, you know, like the things that go against me with the government and the police and things like that. I like, you know, gone through like some family things, you know, like I had to go to court and like testify at like really young ages, you know, like 6 and like 5 and all of that. So it's like when I did go through that, you know, like I just remember certain things, you know, like I remember how my mom was treated being the single white mother of a obviously mixed child, you know, and like how I was like put into rooms all by myself, and like, I don't know, it's just like really crazy experience that I had. I feel like during that process as a kid, like growing up, obviously everything that happens to you like makes your brain in a way, you know? So it really distorted, I guess, my way of trust. So it just takes a lot more than the benefit of doubt for me. So it's like, I can't give you all my trust, but I won't disbelieve everything you say, you know?
The last straw was a few days into the shelter, the one out at Main and Danforth, city shelter. I woke up with a bed bug biting me under the eye, and my eyes swelled shut. My eyes swelled shut for over 2 days, like completely shut. They weren't too eager to, get all on to fixing the ripped up mattresses. I mean, how can you control bed bugs with ripped up mattresses? And women all corralled into a room with about 1.5 feet between each cot. Like all communities, we don't all fit in with each other. So some of the campers over there, they have their thing, and I'm pretty much a loner. I'm not young. So I don't fit in with the age group, so that sort of thing, I could try harder, but I don't know. I'm alone but not lonely, My cat's great company.
Did I hear you say you were an athlete at some
Yeah,
point?
I'm a 2-time national champion in javelin throwing. Yeah, and twice All-American too.
Is that because you went to school in the States?
Yeah, I had a scholarship to the University of Alabama. It was an eye opener, being down south for sure.
Yeah.
Civil rights might have been, improved upon considerably since the 60s or before, but there's still, that great divide, between, little shanty houses, in the poor areas, and the rich white folks, but it's not just in the South, it's everywhere. That gap between rich and poor has gotten worse and worse, wider and wider, which is why we're in the situation we're in.
I've lived in Moss Park for about a decade. I've spent a fair number of hours in this park specifically because of the encampment situation with COVID, doing outreach here, making sure people have enough water, food, access to resources, things like that. There's a couple homeless shelters nearby, safe injection sites, things like that. It's a pretty impoverished neighborhood. I got my start, I guess, in like labor organizing. I tried to unionize the workplace, working at Medieval Times, which was an experience. It did not go.
Wait, yeah.
So I'm working at Medieval Times, and people are getting kicked by horses and stabbed in the face, and and management would like lose paperwork, and it was a hot mess. We're getting paid minimum wage. Sorry?
What did you do there?
I was a sword fighter. I was a stunt guy. Yeah, and I talked to some of the people who'd been there longer than me, and they had these horror stories to share, and they're saying, oh yeah, this is years and years and years of some phenomenal nastiness and exploiting workers, paying them a pittance for like 70-hour split shifts throughout the week to break their bodies. You know, these are young men who eat healthy, who, you know, walk with a cane, and I was like, wait a second, they're not paying me enough to ignore this. What the hell? We started to collect signatures. Someone told management that I was doing this. I was released of my employment without cause. And my understanding is after I left, all the wages went up and benefits got included and things like that. No union formally, but yeah, I'd consider it still, you know, at least a partial win.
Somehow, the city manages to change even faster while standing in place. It's like you went to bed and half of your favorite things about the city suddenly disappeared, only to be replaced by another condo or badly named cannabis store. Some things you just can't expect to last, like Heather's watermelon patch, planted guerrilla style in an overgrown lot, now bulldozed. It's hard enough to take pleasure in the things one used to enjoy. At least some people will always enjoy arguing with strangers. Others have resorted to more defensive measures.
It looks crazy, I'll admit it. Well, last weekend I planted all the seedlings that I've raised from seeds inside under lights since March, and they went in the ground, and the next day I came out and like 7 of them were torn up by some kind of animal. First time they took eggplant plants and they took tomato plants, I think they weren't necessarily taking them. I think that they were digging in the soil for grubs. I think it was probably raccoons, and they were digging for grubs, and they just dug them up as sort of collateral damage. So someone told me on Instagram when I posted a picture that you can just put as many plastic forks as you can, as tightly as you can around it, and it keeps them away because they don't want to get poked. And so I, of course, went to the extreme and bought 1,000 forks from Costco and used 500 of them, plus whatever we had just kicking around the house, and planted them all. I think I probably went a little bit overboard, but you know, I got a lot of borders to defend.
In the ancient world, friendship was fundamental to life. This notion of family being super central, I think it's not that families were not important, but your relationship, I mean, you in this case is certainly a man, like you, the male citizen, and your relationships with other male citizens were what truly mattered, especially in terms of politics and in terms of the shaping of the state and in terms of, you know, war, obviously, and all the sort of macro picture of what was going to happen in society was very much about men being friends. And so the sort of early notion of the state was sort of as a friend group writ large, and the idea that friendship was the shaping mechanism for how politics would be conducted was normal. And then there's sort of a sense that Hobbes in the 17th century was the one to introduce the notion that, in fact, it's kind of the other way around, where the state produces friendship. The state produces the conditions under which people can be friends, because, I mean, I'm certainly not an expert on Hobbes, but I guess the notion that stability and, you know, a shared language, a shared sort of formalized value system, these are the things that make social relations smooth enough that you have these sort of liberty within that structure to develop personal friendships. That if you are sort of, you don't have a superstructure to keep you safe, quote unquote, you can't trust anybody because everybody could potentially be there to screw you over. And so for Hobbes, like, he really stressed how friendship is a subversive element in the state, and can be where dissent and anarchy come from, that these are sort of the elements that threaten state control by, rather than being part of the larger homogeneous group or sort of idea of who you're supposed to be, that the small group is inherently a sort of pushes back against what the state is. The content of those friendship groups could be anything. Like this could be either, he didn't exactly use these terms, but a right-wing group or a left-wing group. It could be a bunch of people who get together to do, checkers. Like that is, it could be that over checkers they talk about how great the king is, or they talk about how much they hate the king and maybe someone should do something about it. But just the function of people having private relationships is where dissent comes out of.
My mother is vaccine hesitant, we'll say. For a number of years, she has been critical of the medical community, if you can call it that. She herself has a number of health issues. And so I do understand that there is skepticism to be had about a system that she feels is failing her. I feel like my mother in particular has gone down this rabbit hole of, if you don't believe what I believe, then you're in on it too. Or, there's this really strange ad hominem happening where, then you've just bought the propaganda. One part that really gets me is do you really believe that all of these researchers are willfully trying to destroy society? Like that doesn't, like the cynicism that is required for a lot of these conspiracy theories, that I find really depressing. I mean, we've been talking very little since I drew some boundaries around this. I mean, she's still my mother. I still love her.
Since it's right on Lake Ontario, in spring, this is one of the first places that migrating birds see after they cross Lake Ontario, which is a pretty exhausting thing to do. So they come down here for a rest, and they have all these, all the trees and the shrubbery and everything, not only to provide them a safe place to rest, but it gives them food too, because there are so many insects around. About 50 years ago, they started to build the Toronto subway system and do a lot of construction downtown. So all the fill from the subway system, it came out here. All the rubble from the buildings they had to deconstruct to build the skyscrapers and City Hall, that came down here too, and gradually it got longer and longer, and they were dumping fill and rubble here right up until about 5 years ago. But what happened in the meantime was Mother Nature took over, and all of a sudden there was grass here, and then there were bushes, and then there were trees. And the reaction on the part of the wildlife was immediate. This is a willow warbler, and you can hear it, it makes this sound. It's transliterated as Fitzbue. So I think something like over 300 species have been recorded on the spit. And I know people who do big days here, and they get over 100 species in one day. There's competition,
There's
is that?
competition and
yeah.
some rivalry. And
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, a lot of birders are serious listers. They keep lists. They list what they see in a day, and they list what they see in a year, and for their lifetime, and for different locations as well. I don't get too wrapped up in the whole listing craze, because it seems to me at some point birding becomes nothing more than an exercise in accounting. Henry David Thoreau, he had an experience that he was describing in his journal once where he was on Walden Pond and he found a different species of fish, one that was colorful and that he'd never seen before. He called it a brim. And he said, in his journal, he was writing about it, and he said, what can I do to learn more about this apparition? All I can do is put myself beside it mentally and try to think like a brim for a moment. He's uniting himself with a different form of life. And he's losing himself in that other form of life. That's a pretty incredible experience.
So we are in the middle of the Bloordale Beach, as you can see. It's a beach. This is a Toronto school that was torn down maybe 2 years ago, and it's going to be redeveloped. There's going to be some condos and a new school. It's kind of a thing that's morphed a few times, but there was this empty lot here, just fenced up as the pandemic started, and a local artist who lives nearby named Sherry Kasman decided that this is a beach because we needed a beach. We needed more public space during the pandemic. It was like the early, maybe late spring, early summer part of the first wave of the pandemic, when public space was really kind of contested, when people were trying to get more space because we needed the space. So she declared it a beach and put signs up all around saying, with water quality signs and beware of sharks. Yeah, it was transgressive for Toronto because it breached the fence, right? This is an officious city where everyone, obeys the rules, and there's lots of rules around how you should behave in public space. So taking down a fence and kind of taking over this space, that is public space. The people own it, even though it is private property of the school board. It was kind of it was fun and ridiculous, but also like a statement about the miserliness sometimes of Toronto's public spaces and the reluctance to embrace these kind of public squares and that sort of thing, public life that just sort of happens in other places organically, but here it's either resisted or it's really like rule based. I think my lowest moment was really early on in April, and some of my friends were I like to try to find the positive things, like, okay, it's not going to be that long. It's not going to be a year. It'll be a few months. We'll be done by summer, just to sort of keep people's spirits up. And some friends are a little more pessimistic and maybe realistic about these things. And we have a thread group, like an iMessage thread group. And I boycotted it for 6 weeks because I thought my friends were too negative about the pandemic, but it wasn't them, it was me. I couldn't deal with how much, like how bad it was, right? Because they were being honest about it and I was being a little bit more Pollyanna, like it's gonna be fine, we'll get through it. And so, but that was probably the lowest moment when I boycotted my friends. Today is a good day. It's hot. It's a long weekend, May 2-4, and you can just sort of feel the things lightening up a bit. I mean, like, it's still heavy. There's still cases every day, but after 14 months of tension, you can sort of feel it loosen up a little bit. And there wasn't that much to rage about this week against the government. For once, it feels sort of okay. It's like the people have exhaled and they've come out of their house and come out of isolation, and the pent-up desire to be with other people, to be around people, to live in a city. Just the reason we live here, the reason we pay all this high rent and all that, and deal with all the crap of a city, is finally slowly kind of coming back.
The winter was very long. I think this time of isolation, I don't live with other people, but I live with animal companions, and I'm so thankful for those relationships because it's been hard being isolated. You know, I think I've been reading that Toronto has had like one of the longest lockdowns in the world. And I know it's greatly impacted people's mental health. People in my life have been struggling throughout the pandemic, not only with their mental health, but also financially. A few people I know lost their businesses. It can become very overwhelming to hear everything that's going on. And it can induce fear in a lot of people. And there's studies to show that when people are fearful or when they're angry for a period of time, that it can impact their immune system. I mean, at the beginning of the pandemic, you know, there was this regulation or bylaws that, you know, people couldn't go outside to the parks. You could walk through the park, but you couldn't sit on a park bench. And I knew people who got tickets. You know, it's funny because at the beginning of the pandemic, people joked about kind of wanting to walk with my dog so they could get outside and have a reason. And I was like, well, sure. I mean, you know, they just have that unconditional love and excitement, you know. I always kind of joke around about, imagine if people greeted each other with such enthusiasm.
That's the mom on me. Yo, mama, you just blessing me. Not lying, mama, keep on blessing me. You keep blessing me. I'm walking and she's blessing me. I'm talking and she's blessing me. I ain't sipping though. I don't need drugs. I don't need lean. All I need is the niggas that get me in between. But I used to serve to a lot of fiends, but doesn't matter.
It's like trap music a little bit slash hip hop. I like you know, the greats, right? I'm a Lil Wayne fan. Like that Lil Wayne does it off the top of the head. He just goes, and like if I could feel that focus and whatever, depending on how I feel at the time, or am I in that mood or at that moment, I can deliver something special. It's been tough and good at the same time, where it's like I got to catch up on some things like my mental health, my addiction that I overcame, and I was journaling and I kept myself composed. 2019, 2018, like was a bad year. Just, you know, the using, the lying, the neglecting, the cheating, you'll cheat to get to whatever you want when you're in addiction. Like it takes over you. Like you're not that person, but at that point in time where you'll do anything to get to the drug, or you'll do anything to like get what you want, right? With being clean, there's complications that come with it during mental health. You're clean, you're not using, you're not really thinking right because something's missing, right? That addiction or that drug is out of the picture right now. So then now I'm dealing with mental health issues now. It's been a whole roller coaster in my life. I've been through ups and downs. I've been psychiatric. I've been to the psychiatric ward about twice, 2 psychiatric relapses, and those are no good. It'll end you back in the hospital, and you got to start all over again, repiecing your life back together. I'm still trying to figure out how to communicate with people and like without cutting them off or not, or just that energy stuff, because I got a lot of that energy to fill, and I put that towards my music and stuff like that.
When did you decide that music was something you wanted to do?
I do it like for a hobby. Like I was just like, I'm not an artist or anything like that, but I like freestyling, and I like, because I have a flow, right? I have a pretty nice flow, and every song that all those songs I've showed to my friends, they're like, wow, I never knew you could do that. And I do it in one take. I think it's I believe it's like part of my like mental health. It's like, once I have a thought process going, I don't stop, and I can say things that I don't even think to think of, and then it just goes on camera and it goes into the music, and then I get the feedback back, and it's like, wow, your flow is nice. What's going on? I'm like, oh, I just Nothing, man. I just did that one take and I just like freestyled it. So imagine if I was writing or anything like that. I just like to take it off the top of the head, how I'm feeling, what I'm looking at, and that's how I deliver my freestyles.
Am I allowed to say I saw a friend? I don't want to. I social distantly saw a friend for the first time in a year, and we had a picnic. It was the first opportunity I had to spend quality time with a friend in the past year. The first year was brutal. And it didn't just affect my relationships with friends. Like, I haven't seen my one set of parents in a year and a half. And I haven't seen my siblings either. So, my program I'm taking at the University of Toronto is a mental health specialist. And I have experienced living with like a mental health condition myself. But then I've also seen how it's influenced older adults. So my family took care of an older adult for like 5 years in her last stages of life. And I feel like it's a neglected aspect in the healthcare. We focus so much on treating their physical ailments, but not improving their cognitive conditions.
So what was last year like, your last year of university?
As my psychiatrist put it, I was like stranded on an island. A really sad one. I was a little bit depressed. But I think like even like you would log onto a classroom forum and every student was like, I can't do this anymore. I'm struggling. I don't know what I'm going to do. And I think it was really hopeless. And you also had no one around you was thriving. So that was difficult to witness as well.
What did it feel like to move back home?
It felt like a step back in terms of my independence. I think any young person that's currently, you know, in school or in like this transition phase of their early 20s, like the cost of living, that's really, really intimidating. I'm leaving Toronto.
Oh, you are?
Yes, I most definitely am. This is temporary while I finish my education. I'm very grateful that I'm able to be here. It's not sustainable in the long term. I'm not saying I want to live lavishly, but for example, in my fields, you make the same amount of money working in Toronto versus working in an alternative city, but your costs of living are so much higher. So again, it relates to me having to delay things that are really important to me, like the prospect of starting my own family, like all of those next steps I want to take are really limited in Toronto. So they're losing me.
There has always been talk amongst Indigenous peoples of unmarked graves around residential schools, and that the number of children who died while being imprisoned by the system is probably a lot greater than estimated. And it's only been, you know, within the past, I don't know, a few years, maybe not even 10 years, where that has become part of the education, but even still, it's just a snippet of what really has happened here. I wonder what the future holds, and when I think of the future, I'm like even thinking just like a couple of months from now, I'm thinking of the winter. It's definitely different since the pandemic. You know, I'm not planning so far ahead anymore. It's really kind of about taking every day as it comes. But I think it's important to have hope. I don't know. I guess it's more like trust. I guess I could think trust. That I trust that I'm going to be okay. I trust that my relationship and my connection to my spirituality. I trust that. And whatever may come, I will be prepared in many ways, you know. And I don't say that kind of flippantly, like I actually have survival skills or indigenous lifeway skills. You know, I know how to harvest foods and medicines from the land. I know how to make shelter. I know how to make fire by friction. You know, that was a way for me to connect with the land and those indigenous lifeways. But so I have a sense of confidence, you know, if things were to get challenging, but I hope that things do shift. Yeah, I don't know. I definitely have mixed feelings about the future. Mm-hmm. That's for sure. Just because of prophecies that I've heard and stuff like that. So, yeah. So, yeah.
We know a lot of people that lost people. I mean, this year I think I've sent 7 funeral arrangements. Maybe one day we'll all get together and talk about it, or maybe one day we'll all get together and not talk about it. I don't know.
Yeah, we'll just talk about balloons and whether
we'll
or not
shoot the shit.
Whether or not snakes know that they're eating baby birds.
Are they evil? I don't know. I guess I can take some comfort in the fact that my book was such a huge success. I mean, the money for sure helps things.
So yesterday, so I'm fully vaccinated now. A lot of people I know are. And so I've started taking the TTC regularly again. And yesterday I was reading a book, and a man who was also reading a book struck up conversation with me about what we were reading. And it was just like a perfect little 3-minute conversation. He got off the train, and before he got off the train, he reached his hand out and we shook hands. And it was so good. I realized how much I missed brief, intimate exchanges with strangers on the TTC, because that's a thing, you know? If you're open to it, and it just changes your whole, I mean, it changed my day. It made me so, so happy. A sort of absence of fear, right? Of another person too close to you, you know? And the sort of guarding of your space so rigidly. So yeah, I have really missed that, the intimacy that you can have with a stranger, you know.
What do you most look forward to doing when the pandemic is over?
I don't know if I'll wait until it's over to do the things I look forward to doing. But yeah, just going out and going out east and trying to create a community. Yeah.
Like Nova Scotia?
Mm-hmm. Just some little piece of land where, build a little cabin and have a small solar system and hopefully fresh water nearby, and grow some food and invite some friends to live together and see what we could create together,
In the first week of June, another long lockdown would come to an end. You could be forgiven for feeling just a little optimistic. It was a month when we learned how to be with other people again, even if sometimes that came at a distance. It wasn't always easy to tell how things went, though. Maybe it was more than the fear of contagion that kept us apart. It was a month when the weather seemed to change every few minutes. Rain, sun, wind, hail. You try recording only outside in these conditions.
That's a big one.
And since we're on the weather, shall we mention that as May ends, glaciers and Arctic sea ice are thinning at rates faster than previously thought? A happier sight is seeing the water levels rise at the local pool. Until the next day, and we see this injured mallard trapped inside the pool's fencing, unable to get free. Like the rest of us, he makes the most of his time in isolation before eventually finding his way back to his friends. Perhaps Thomas had it right when he said the hardest part of the pandemic wasn't the science or the technology, but the human stuff. The obvious problem with this movie? Will we relate to any of this a year from now, 5 years from now? Or will it only blur and fold in on itself, just as we experience time during it? As it turns out, there will be many more bad months after this May, for reasons both related and unrelated to the pandemic.